I have the pleasure of introducing Kelvin to you all. Kelvin Watson is the director of a Broward County Libraries Division, serving 1.9 million people and overseeing 38 locations and the library's nearly $70 million budget. He has made transformative changes in his 3 years with Broward County and led ambitious and innovative initiatives that have positioned the Broward County Libraries as a community leader by streamlining access to resources, introducing new technology, developing partnerships and new collaborative relationships with internal agencies and external agencies. Broward County Library was named the 2020 Library of the Year by the Florida Library Association and the 2020 Library of the Future by the American Library Association. Mr. Watson is the 2020 Florida co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Task Force to bring young BIPOC and LGBTQ+ individuals together to make their ideals pervasive within the Florida Library Association. Mr. Watson was selected by Legacy South Florida magazine as one of South Florida's 50 most influential and powerful Black professionals of 2020. Kelvin was named 2019 Librarian of the Year by the Florida Library Association and 2019 Friends of the African American Research Library and Cultural Community Service and Distinguished Achievement honoree. That is some impressive bio, Kelvin, and we thank you so much for being with us today and leading our Friends group and all its Friends participants in this discussion of the Nickel Boys. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Hannah, as well. Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to discussing the Nickel Boys with you. And as many of you have had an opportunity to engage with me before, I look forward to having a very engaging conversation, as you probably can imagine. So let's talk about the Nickel Boys. So the Nickel Boys is a 2019 novel by Colson Whitehead. It's based on the real story of the Dozier School, a reform school that's in Florida that operated for 111 years and had its history exposed by a university's archaeological investigation. Set in the 1960s, the novel follows Elwood Curtis, a studious African-American from Tallahassee with a sense of justice, who is adjudicated delinquent and sent to the Nickel Academy, a juvenile reformatory in Eleanor, Florida, after riding in a stolen vehicle to attend university classes. While at the Nickel Academy, he befriends Jack Turner, who goes by his family name and who has a less optimistic viewpoint on life. Elwood attempts to serve his time without incident, but is seriously beaten on 2 occasions. Once for intervening to help a boy being attacked by sexual predators, and once after writing a letter complaining of poor conditions at the Nickel Academy. The time at the school is interspersed with accounts of the older Elwood, who has moved to New York City and has lived there for many years. And after Turner he overhears of a plan to have Elwood killed by the administration because of the letter he wrote, the 2 attempt an escape. Elwood is shot dead while Turner escapes. The latter had, in fact, falsely adopted Elwood's name to live up to his ideals and had established a business in New York City. When this investigation in 2010s finally begins to expose the now shuttered school secret, Turner flies to Tallahassee to give testimony to his friend's fate. So that's a summary of the book. If you didn't read the book, I think I just pretty much spelled a lot of it out for you. And I know Julie and Hannah are going to ask me some questions regarding the book and kind of the book review from Director Watson on my thoughts around the Nickel Boys.
Kelvin, I want to add that in keeping with the author's writing, when we refer to the boys, we may be referring to them as Black boys, as the author did, instead of African American boys. And I just want all the participants to know that when we refer to them as Black boys.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, to me, I've grown to use African American over the years, so but I definitely know what you're talking about. So I appreciate that clarification.
Kelvin, I listened to the book and I also read the book, but I found that when I was listening to it, I couldn't continue. I mean, I didn't finish listening to it because it was just so painful. Did you listen to it, and did you have that same reaction? Or
I listened to it, Hannah, as I listened to a majority of the books. As I've previously probably mentioned to some, listening to the books actually allows me to visualize better what it is the author is trying to say. And I can, just close my eyes and listen, and I can be in that place. So that's my experience. It was, some parts of it was difficult to listen to at times when you think about what these boys experienced at the Nickel Academy.
It was horrifying. It was atrocious. I didn't think, I only read it, I didn't listen, but I wasn't sure I was able to get through it. And as beautiful as he writes, and it was, and read because of how he wrote, it, in the beginning, it made me nervous to continue because I just didn't know that I could make it through.
Yeah, I'm reading something else now that actually talks about slavery and torture, and how the system being the system of racism, or you could think of it. I'm actually reading the book is called The Caste, and it talks about the caste system and when I think about what I'm reading now, and I thought about the Nickel Boys, it puts me in the mind of, even though it occurred in the 1960s, that it was the experience that African Americans, Blacks, went through beginning in 1619 when they were brought to this country. And that's the torture that, as it was described in the book, that's what I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
well, Kelvin, before you read the book, did you know that it was based on a true place that actually was here in Florida?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it, Hannah. I did, as I am a librarian, I did research a little more, but was not familiar with this particular school, but certainly was familiar with these types of institutions that are across they're across the country, right? When you think about these experiences, you think about just reformatory school in general in the early 1900s. Certainly, I wouldn't think that this would still be going on in the 1960s, but clearly, these are experiences that probably are still go on to some extent
Yes.
today in these types of institutions.
Kelvin, that's what I'm afraid of. As I was reading, and Colson's writing was so vivid to me, and I just thought how they called themselves teachers, and they were students, but really they were criminals and animals, but they called themselves teachers. That bothered me.
You know, for these types, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Hannah. What I was going to say was, you know, it's sort of like when you think of these situations in that it's not just, you know, it's not just the teachers and quote unquote the teachers and the people who are doing the torturing, but it's also the trustees. It's also the government. It's the system. It's the systematic cultural issues that are in place and there are multiple people that are complicit, up to and including the government to some extent.
Yes.
Well, how about the entire town? Everyone benefited. They got they got the food that was meant for the boys. They got the ice cream. They got the school supplies, and they had workers, I mean, basically slaves who were doing whatever they needed done. So the entire town seemed to be complicit with this.
Yeah, the only difference now with the company, what is it, the corporation that runs the prisons across the United States, it just went from what happened here to now it's corporations that are running prisons and making prisons profitable. Therefore, it enhances that school to prison pipeline that you talk about or hear about, that this is what it is, you know, it's leading people from schools who aren't doing well in most cases, that they end up in prisons, and they stay in prisons because it's profitable for the corporation.
Can we go back and talk about the character of Elwood? Because he's really a fascinating character. Julie, I want to pick up on something that you just said about how the teachers weren't teachers and the students, I mean, you know, they weren't learning. Does anyone remember how excited Elwood was when he first, like, not excited, but he sort of like felt, well, maybe the school won't be so bad. Maybe this place isn't going to be hard. Maybe I'll be able to learn here and you know, take some good courses. And remember, he goes to the teacher and says, you know, this is easy for me. I want more advanced stuff.
Yes.
And then the reaction is just so powerful.
Yes, and then he asks for more books and more advanced books, and they kept telling him 2 or 3 times, yeah, or I think I was, yes, I've asked, and yes, and then he realizes after a while, they're never coming. The books are never coming. They're not learning.
Yeah. Well, Spencer certainly sets up the superintendent Spencer, who is the person who is doling out the torture is, you know, when people first come to when Elwood comes, right, he says, you know, if you earn merit for working hard and behaving well, these points will help you move up the ranks. And if a student earns enough points, he'll be released, you know, into the free world. So he sets up this false sense of success, you know, for Elwood, that Elwood quickly finds out that there's no way that you would ever be able to subtract from the merits, let's say the merits that you would get to be successful.
Well, Elwood actually says, you know, the 4 levels were Grubs, Explorer, Pioneer, and Ace. And he says, I'm going to do it even faster. I'm going to like just move right up so that I can show them, you know, because that's who I am. And then he realizes what you just said, Calvin, is that like, you're not really going to move up. We have a question from Rhonda, who says that she was curious if the white boys in the school were also tortured. Someone else just answered, yeah, they were, because they were poor, but the torture was not as severe. Do you recall any discussion of that in the book?
I think not necessarily in the book, but of course, since this book is fiction, the book is fiction. It's based on and the stories though that helped Colson Whitehead write the book were from the white students who attended the Dozier school. So that would mean, in my opinion, that certainly the torture was doled out to some extent to all of the students that attended.
But it was different because
but it was.
Yeah.
I would say that Colson, since only the white students go back and have their groups, their support groups, that he took some, I think he took some privilege to say, you know, hey, in a based on knowledge of something of the institutions that are segregated, and understanding also that in a lot of these cases that you would think that Black boys, African Americans, would be treated worse. I think that's what he brings out, right? Because he doesn't have those firsthand stories, or, you know, of any Black boys. He takes some privilege to kind of talk about how it probably was for them.
Kelvin, why do you think that the white boys, they were the only ones on the website to document anything?
You know, I've thought about this, and when I think about the book and how Colson wrote it, and he talks about Turner, who of course is who has now turned into Elwood, that the situation at Nickel Academy traumatized him so, and I think that, you know, part of it is what happened, those experiences that happened. If you think about, what is it, Tiki Boy, right, who sees Turner, who runs into Turner, and he's now, you know, this alcoholic, for example. He's, you know, somewhat probably buried his pain in alcohol. And so I think that one opinion is that they were traumatized so much that they didn't want to talk about it. The other part of it is maybe some of them did not survive, and there's varying levels of, you know, when I say survive, didn't live to tell the story. But on the and then maybe the other folks just, again, traumatized, wanted to put it behind them, and or led to other things, like folks who went to the military. You know, if you think about the 1960s and think about drugs and heroin, and you think about all of that, those types of experiences, I think, so I've thought a lot about that, as you can see, Julie, to say these are the things that probably could have resulted in the Black men not being a part of these groups, and or wanting to share what happened to them at the Dozier School for Boys.
Well, Kelvin, you just gave away one of the big
Sorry.
of the book. In case anyone has not read the book, That's Life, because I think it's an important thing for us to talk about. So in this book, the character that we know most about, it seems, is Elwood, and the book goes from the present to the past, and we think that we're dealing with the narrator whose name is Elwood, and in fact, it's not Elwood. Can you talk a little about that, Kelvin, and if you thought that worked or didn't work? Like, who is the real narrator? And
you know, I thought it worked, and I was in my preparation for tonight's discussion. I actually thought about some of my own personal experiences, and that, you know, now, you know, nowadays we call it identity theft, but in my own, I use a personal experience of people who in the African American community would sometimes, because of different situations, take on other people's identities to escape situations, right? So for example, if you were, I'm from St. Louis, so if you did something in St. Louis as a crime and you wanted to get away, it was somewhat easy to go someplace and assume somebody's identity or and live under that identity until it came out. Most of the time it comes out when people pass away. But that's something that, so I thought it worked. I thought it worked in that Turner assumed Elwood's identity to sort of ensure that Elwood's destiny was completed, was done, was, I went back and thought about the transition of Langston Hughes' poem, A Dream Deferred, right? I thought about A Dream Deferred, and if you think about that and you think about the ending of the book, how Turner returns, or Turner goes to Tallahassee, right? He checks into the hotel that Elwood actually worked at, and Elwood would dream about Black people eating in the dining room and how Turner fulfilled that dream. So it sort of went full circle for me when I think about how it works, right? That Turner's telling Elwood's story and has become Elwood and completed, again, the dreams and the thoughts and who Elwood was, because Turner certainly was the opposite of Elwood.
Yes.
And that, so that's it. I mean, it's not the destination, but it's the journey, right? It's the journey. And that's the piece where I think, that's why I think it works, Hannah. I gave you a long answer and it covered a lot of territory, but as you can see, as I said, I thought about that life and fulfilling what Turner did for him.
But I think that's so interesting, because I thought that the twist was just a literary device. But you're telling me it's also a phenomenon that is found within the African American community. It's not, you weren't like shocked by it.
No, I wasn't.
We have a few comments that I just want to read quickly. Drazia says that she thinks the writing was brilliant, and it was hard to read the book because it was painful. But she felt that it was okay because, she just felt that Elwood made it through. Like many of us felt that because he was telling the story. And so I guess there was this feeling of optimism, and then he doesn't make it through, but she felt that made the book really almost, great as opposed to good. But Helen said that, it works from a plot view, but he gave it away because Tucker's impersonation was very different than who Elwood was. Elwood, he doesn't think the way Elwood did, and he didn't take an interest in reading. But Kelvin, there were other things that gave it away. Were there other things that you sort of knew, like when you look back, you had some clues that this was going to happen?
I did. I mean, again, certainly as when the situation regarding the letter that was written, that was pulling me kind of in that certainly somebody died. And so I wasn't as shocked, actually. But I have talked to people who were pretty much shocked that they found out that it was, that Turner, had assumed Elwood's life, and it didn't really hit them until literally they got to that point.
That
but
was me. That was
um,
me. I didn't know.
but I kind of saw it maybe a little before that again, as in the pushback that Turner certainly was giving Elwood, because Elwood had this certainly this strong moral compass of not and refusing to compromise his values, and he knew it would get him into trouble, but he still would go to do the right thing, right, or what he considered to be the right thing.
He couldn't let things be, even since he was, worked in Mr. Mercado, I think that was the name, the tobacco shop. He had to go after the boys that took the candy. And then he had to go after he had to make right when he saw something that was right before his first whipping, when he saw what was going wrong with the three boys at the shower. He just couldn't let things be. He always had to make things right.
And I think that came from his listening to Dr. King, his listening to the album, the record.
Yes.
And I think that was part of it, right? So as you I probably in some ways can see things that I do personally as well, in the things that I know, my knowledge, or read about, and that you have definitely these strong convictions. I think a lot of us also do as well, but certainly there are certain things that we just don't compromise on, right? We just kind of we persevere, we push through. And when you were reading my bio, I thought about some of my own kind of, here's short time, but I still push through and fight the battles. And if I see wrong, certainly there's so you can take what happened. You can take the conversation that people were just having a few weeks ago about John Lewis, right? You see something that's wrong, that's not right, you got to say something, and that's certainly Elwood.
That's interesting that you bring up John Lewis, because I really thought a lot about the role Martin Luther King does play in this book, and the impact it has on Elwood. And throughout the early parts of the book, you see how Elwood is doing all he can to just internalize Martin Luther King's message and his approach to life. Do you think by the end, do you feel he's given up on Martin Luther King, or do you feel that he's still trying? Like at what point does he just say, this doesn't work, you can't fight hate with love? Or does he believe that till the end?
I think for Elwood, I certainly think that it was until he died. I think from Turner, though, Turner assuming Elwood's identity, maybe, that wasn't so deep inside of, those convictions weren't necessarily so deep inside of him. But I believe that Elwood died with those convictions, that those values of wanting to make sure that right was that he was on the right side of this conversation, right, and that he wanted to point out to the inspectors who came to visit the school, that he wanted to point out, listen, this is just they just slapped some lipstick on this pig, right?
Yes.
This isn't really what the situation is. So I think he died certainly working to denounce bigotry, the racism, the torture, and wanting to expose the Nickel Academy for what it is and what it was.
Well, he actually said at one point that that was one way of getting out of the school, that he would just, does anyone remember the reasons, the way you could get out of the school? He said, I guess
there were 4 ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the 5th way was to somehow be able to tell on Nickel. And that's what he was doing in that letter. He was trying to communicate to the powers that be in the state.
So what happened with his letter in the end? I guess.
I don't think they. What happens is really nothing happened. Certainly, if you look at these types of stories, and I was trying to think about something that happened. It was either in Alabama or Mississippi, but somewhere down in the South, where these types of issues with reformatory schools and prisons have been pointed out. Nothing, happened. Certainly, the administration did not tell what happened to Elwood. They kind of swept that under that secret, under the rug. When you think, because if you go back to when Chicky asked Turner / Elwood, when did he get out? He didn't even realize that he had escaped. So certainly this entire situation was swept under the rug, and the school kept doing, what they were doing.
Well, what I recall is that they actually did, I guess word did get out somewhere, because they tried to behave for a little while, and they didn't kill him right away because they were afraid of the consequences.
Yeah, they were waiting.
Weeks,
they were waiting. Would there be any consequences, right? So you're right, Hannah. So, but once that occurred, once the 3 weeks passed, the hammer didn't come down on them. They were like, okay, it's time to deal with the situation.
Yeah. And Turner.
Go on, Julie.
No, I was going to say, and Turner, looking out for his friend because they had become so close, hears from somebody that worked in the office, one of the boys that worked in the offices, that they were going to take him out back the next night. And Turner that's when Turner goes to him and says, we've got to get out of here because they're going to take you out and kill you. And I thought, for me, that was the moment that Wood thought to himself. He was always following Martin Luther King with saying, even if they do wrong by you, you're still going to love them. And I think he tried to visualize that and tried to be that. But then at that point, when he knew he was going to get killed, he was going to run for the hills. I think that was a turning moment for Elwood, that he had to save himself.
Yeah, at the urging of Turner, I agree, Julie.
At the urging of Turner.
At the urging of Turner, yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, that brings us to the whole incident with the fight. If you recall, there's a fight every year. Kelvin, do you want to summarize that for us? Or do you remember that part where there's a fight between the strongest African-American and the strongest, and there's a bet put on the fight.
Right, and so you're talking about when I can't think of his
Griff.
Is it Griff? Griff. So when Griff actually loses the ends up losing the fight, and of course he.
No, Griff ends up. He's supposed to lose the fight.
Well,
right?
Yes.
He's supposed to lose. He was told to lose the fight, and he was, I guess, simple-minded. He either forgot or he just didn't really understand what was being asked.
Right. So, I'm trying to think of your question, Hannah. I apologize.
So that it takes up a lot of time in the book. I'm relating it back to what Julie was saying. about what it means to be taken out back. And
to the white to the
behind the White
where
House.
behind the White House where they tie you up and and torture you.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's certainly where Elwood was headed. But Spencer, I'm switching up on you, so I apologize. I'm thinking about the White House. I'm thinking about the how they use this torture, not only physically but mentally as well. And the part we didn't talk about was and we didn't even talk about the solitary confinement that that Elwood was actually put in, as well. And I think, these are, if you think about, when my dad, it's like when your father gets home, you're going to get this whipping, and it's like anticipation. So you kind of know that these are this is the impact that's going to be the result of you not following the rules. And there's levels of this up to and including not returning, death, right? And that's to Julie's point about what might have where Elwood might have transitioned would probably be at that point, because he had already experienced 2 torturous whippings already. He had already experienced the solitary confinement, and when he going to that level, there's certainly no return.
No.
When Elvin was in the solitary confinement, one of the quotes from him really bothered me, and it said that from Elwood, the worst thing in solitary confinement happens to me every day. It's when I wake up. And it was so disturbing to me. And then in the epilogue, Colson Whitehead says, from a former inmate that had been in solitary confinement for 27 years, those were his actual words. And he took that quote when he was writing for Elwood. And I just couldn't believe that really, those were actual words of an inmate there.
I think, sometimes when I have these discussions, as you guys know, I will share other books. I'll share some of my own personal experience, but I'll share something else if you, for all of us on here, if you haven't seen When They See Us, that will put you in mind of some of this experience of being in solitary confinement and being inside your own, where there's only you and your mind, and what that can do to you over a period of time, and the torture, right? And the torturous experiences that you can have by being imprisoned, both physically and mentally.
Well, like the boys in that movie or in the real life situation, and with Elwood, they never committed a crime. I mean, Elwood, he was so innocent, and he was just you just feel that he's going to be fine. He's going to, he's going to go off to college, and somehow things will work out, and then it doesn't. I mean, it just seems, I don't know. I wasn't prepared for everything that happened in this book.
No,
But
he was so close to.
Yeah, you certainly
so close
don't
to
think.
a beautiful future, and nothing happened for him.
Just that one turn of riding in a car that he didn't know was stolen, certainly, but how that one incident, and we were just talking about something, Hannah, about when they see us, right? The wrong place at the wrong time, and how that shift went from this life that he was going to have, great life, going to college, being educated and being successful, and where that could have been, to where it actually went. And and having not done anything wrong, right, other than accepting a ride, and guilty by association.
Well, that's what was so painful. I mean, and I think that reading the book during a time where you have George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and you just feel like these are people who what's their crime, and then you see what happens in terms of life. It was very, very
so true. Yes, so true.
It is certainly this experience, this book, written the way that it is, in that when you talk about the issues of you're guilty just because of the pigmentation of your skin, for example, right? So your race, or that you're Black and the other people aren't Black, and what happens as a result of that. I just saw something popped up that said it was like the character in A Lesson Before Dying. I can concur with that. But again, this is the story. If I can share something that Hannah, if I can share something really quickly, Hannah. So I was sharing something with Hannah that I walk in my neighborhood. And Hannah and I live in the same neighborhood. I've lived probably in the same neighborhood as most of you on this call, on this Zoom chat. And I walk early in the morning, but I used to walk on Griffin Road, and I no longer walk on Griffin Road. I walk in my gated community. And so Hannah asked me, why do I do that? And I guess it was a couple of days later that the incident happened with George Floyd. And I think that the light bulb, I think, went on, and that is in line with my experience. Elwood experience. He had his first experiences early on with racism, and I have had the opportunity. Here it is. So Elwood became woke to the world when he and discovered racism when he was talking about Yolanda King and going to the theme park, and so my first experiences were not around a theme park, but certainly was when I wasn't 6, I was 9. I think I was around 9, and I was playing in my backyard, and the police drove up on me and a couple of my friends while we were playing in the backyard, and pulled their guns out on us as we were running back and forth. And so that incident certainly is one that I am familiar with and personally experienced, but that certainly wasn't the last one. That was just the first one. The last one was probably just was about a year or so ago. So back, so Elwood, and that's why I mentioned the destination, but the journey, because at the end, you saw Turner take on Elwood life and try to fulfill what he thought was that, a good destiny for a good, journey, more or less, to get to the destination for Elwood. And that's what I think we all should strive for. And, not give up necessarily, but continue to educate, talk about these types of situations, talk about this type of, this book, for example. Again, even though it's fiction, in reading it, you could certainly feel that this could have been the truth. This could have been nonfiction very easily.
Yes.
Because these are the things that truly have happened. These types of situations have happened. So, yeah.
I really appreciate what you've just shared with us. And I think it's
Me
really,
too.
it brings a lot of the feelings I had in terms of this book to the forefront. It's difficult. I want to pick up on something that you were, that you just said though. Elwood takes, Turner takes Elwood's name as a way of honoring him. But then he goes back to tell his story as another way of honoring him. Mm-hmm. Which way, what did you think about that in terms of what would have been the best way to honor Elwood, and what provoked him to go back? Like what made him actually go back in the end?
Think about the statement that I was just making, that he was trying to fulfill. You listen that word, right? Trying to fulfill Elwood's destiny, trying to do that. And the reason he went back is because that, I believe, freed him, finally allowed him to be free, because I don't think he was really free, right? He had never, he was, in a lot of ways, again, he wasn't himself. He wasn't Turner. He had not talked about, his wife didn't even know that he was, she didn't even know who he was, right?
He had Elwood's license.
Right.
I mean, his license.
Right.
Yeah.
He had been traumatized, and it was like a prison, right? He escaped, but he really hadn't escaped, right? And that, I think, was the reason why he went back to tell the story, so that he could be free.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the same thing.
Survivor's guilt. Sorry.
Yes. I also think, Kelvin, I agree with you, but in addition, maybe he went back because when he knew the boys were being dug up, I can't think of a nice way to say it, but he was going to give him an honorable burial and a proper burial. Did you lose me?
No.
I'm here, Julie.
Okay. I didn't know if the internet went out, but maybe that had something to do with it also, but mostly what Kelvin said, he had to free himself.
What was really depressing was the thought that a lot of people didn't know that the boys had been killed because they didn't have kin, or they were just going to be told that the boys had run away. Like, no one ever really knew the truth. Even after all those years, no one knew what had gone on there. And that was also, for me, very, very painful, not to have anyone believe your story, or no one was telling the story even. One of the criticisms I read of this book, which I found, well, you know what, let me toss it out to the two of you, was the way that women are portrayed in the book. That a critic felt that, who are the women here? And there's no, any thoughts on that, Kelvin? Any thoughts on how the women are portrayed?
I think, let me say it the way I'm going to say it. I think in no. Right? I think in no. growing up in a predominantly female-oriented family, right, where we didn't have many male role models present because they were in jail or dead or whatever, right? My own personal experiences. My father grew up in a single parent household. I think Elwood's grandmother did yes, Evelyn. Harry's mother, Evelyn, Harriet, that's right, Harriet. Harriet, I think, did what she could to try to protect and prepare Elwood for, what could happen. And unfortunately, again, my own personal and experiences is, my grandmother and mother and all of, they try to protect us and shield us and teach us, and that's the strength in trying to do that when you're, when you are, mother and father and doing all that doing all that you can. So I think that Harriet did display strength. She certainly was trying to guide Elwood in the right way, but ultimately, as you hear about so often, he got caught up in the system, and that's I don't take I wouldn't criticize for that. I mean, I think there's only so much you can do when you as an African American woman and as African American men, and what could happen to us. So those are my thoughts. I think, yeah, she did what she could. I mean, she working. It's difficult when you think about the system, right? The hierarchy, and where you have white, others being Asians, Latinos, and then Blacks, and then you have women like down even below that. Black women. So, that's, again, those are just some thoughts that I'll share. I think there was strength. So I would not take that as, I didn't see that there was any weakness, and particularly in her.
Sue Hoffman just wrote that she was up against the system as well. And look, she tried. I mean, she hired a lawyer. She went to see the lawyer, and then that went nowhere. The lawyer stole her money after encouraging her. So that was.
And that happens still. That happens still today. So those types of situations.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad and true. It's sad and true. What about Millie? I'm sorry. I know you probably want to wrap up. I just want to say the one other female was Millie. And I thought, even though we didn't know much about Millie at the end, that was Turner's wife in the end. He found true love, and she loved him. And even though he wasn't honest with her, she understood as the story came out. And I found that was strength in that, in understanding where he was coming from, and she was going to allow his story to come out to her little by little and do what he had to do in the end, which was to go to Tallahassee.
Yeah, I agree, Julie.
And the only other thing, sorry, Hannah, the only other woman I can think of, it bothered me, and she was a minor character, but when Elwood took that first beating, and the nurse and the doctor too, but when the nurse had to nurse him back to health, and think of the hundreds, thousands of boys that she had, And she didn't do anything or say anything. It was
That's
so disturbing.
Being complicit to
Yeah.
these types of situations and issues. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, there's a lot in this book. Marilyn just wrote that. She found it very difficult to read it because it was injustice at its worst. And I think that we sort of know from the very beginning, even though some of us are hopeful that Elwood makes it out because we think he's the narrator, it's a very painful book to read about injustice on every page almost. But I think the book is a success in that it really makes you think and
Definitely.
really brought, definitely we're not going to forget about the Dozier School at this point. So,
No.
So Kelvin, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Tonight. For those of you who are interested, we spoke before with Kelvin and he has agreed to do another book with us. The next book is going to be Cast, which is the book that Oprah picked, and it's a very powerful book. We'll give you a few months to read it and to make sure the library has enough copies. But Calvin, we hope that in a few months you'll come back and have some more wine with us. And
sure.
With us.
I love wine.
And we love literature. So we want to thank everyone. It was a powerful book. Because of the structure of the evening, we couldn't involve everyone in the actual discussion. And I know many of you really enjoyed, bouncing ideas off of Kelvin directly, but this is the structure that we thought would work best for tonight. So, and I think it did work. I'm glad to see some people want to read it. It was, who haven't read it, it's really a book worth reading. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Kelvin. Stay safe, everybody. And
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kelvin. Thank you,
everybody.
Hannah.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Julie, Hannah, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.